go. Let's go to another one. Another topic that you guys mentioned in the prediction roundup post. Another topic that you guys highlighted was the 2024 elections as a big issue that we're going to be facing next year. Why'd you guys highlight that one?
Yeah, for me, and I think I mentioned that it was the top risk of 2024. And look, everybody wants to say cybersecurity is a top risk, and it is. It's been the top risk, I think, probably for the last 10 years, and nobody's doing anything about it. But because in the United States, at least we have the elections coming up, and with what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and by the way, what's happening in South America right now, we are going to see more friction there. People wanting to come out, wanting to be heard, and then, of course, as there always is, their whole march or their whole protest will be subverted by the Antifa types, and they're going to come out and start to cause damage. And that's my big concern, is that corporate, first of all, law enforcement is not ready. Law enforcement will let your business burn if it doesn't work into their plan to disperse them. So we saw this in riots in Oakland. We've seen it in Los Angeles. We've seen it. And by the way, some of the most advanced approaches to quelling civil unrest in the nation are on the West Coast. I'm sorry, New York, you don't win. LAPD does. So and I've seen them form a skirmish line, and the crowd is going one way, and they're just destroying everything, and the skirmish line doesn't move. So it just they don't have the resources to muster to do the things that need to be done, perhaps to protect everything. So because of how we're becoming more divided as a United States, at least politically, I think we're going to see a lot of people just wanting to be heard, and then those protests will be subverted. And this is what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. This is what we saw in the late 2010s with different movements around law enforcement use of force. So I think 2024, that's going to be a big risk, and mainly because law enforcement doesn't have the capacity to deal with it as much. So if a lot of things are kicking off in a town, that's usually what overwhelms law enforcement, is that they can't respond to everything. We had this in the LA riots, by the way, in the 90s. It is nothing new. It is what it is. And so that's my caution to corporate security professionals.
Yeah, I'll add on just a bunch of other stuff that a lot of people already know. We've been dealing with it now for a couple of years, but I think it's become more pervasive as technology starts to evolve, which is what we just talked about: the impersonation piece, right? The deep fake piece, the constant misinformation pieces that are going to be out there. I think this is going to be at a whole different level with Trump coming back in. That just creates a whole pot of fun times. I mean, you can already see with the DeSantis getting involved in this stuff, and the Democratic side of the Democrat side of the House really trying to figure out, is Biden in, out? Is he going to run? Not going to run? Who else can we get in there? This is going to be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one for a lot of infosec people, cybersecurity folks, the AI folks that are in social media, right? Social media companies that are constantly maneuvering. One of the social media company that I work for, possibly, I'm really proud that last election, I think our numbers were at 98.4% of automatically shutting things down that the AI picked up as negative. So there's some really positive stuff that's working. And that number is only increasing, right? Again, we're putting a lot of money into generative AI, so it's only going to get better. But yeah, and technology keeps on getting better. So what are we doing to make sure we're combating that? So it's going to be a real fun election, 2024. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I like that answer, Carlos. Like, just a lot of like specific people or specific like roles in the security industry that might be impacted. But then, like Scott, like you're saying, even if you don't think you're kind of involved with this kind of stuff, you're just like, I'm doing my business. If things get really dicey,
Yeah.
then you need to be aware of it. I think of it like we've seen this with the Israel-Palestine conflict. It's like, okay, that's far away. Why do I need to pay attention to this? I don't do business with any Israeli companies or anything like that, or anything. Like, I have no one on our company has ever have a political
They're not
opinion on
traveling
anything. I
there.
have
Yeah.
nothing. But that all be true. But if something is popping off down the street where there's a big protest that could disrupt your business, then that's still stuff that you need to be aware of.
Well, remember when the Israelis were accused, and this was only a few weeks ago, they were accused of sending a missile into the courtyard or the parking lot of a hospital, killing. At first, it was hundreds, right? And then
Hmm.
we literally have these peace advocates that are in the country or in the area that are saying, "Nah, that was a Gazan or a Hamas missile that was misguided and came down on the hospital." So, and I'm not for or against any of these things, but what I'm saying is that we had a huge uptick in people protesting in very violent ways. It hasn't slowed down. And so what I think what we're seeing, and I'm trying to study and understand this a little bit better, but what I'm reading is the the tactic has changed for these protests. What once was a peaceful protest or started out as a peaceful protest that was something that law enforcement knew about and that they had gotten the right permits to march and all these things has become, we're just going to show up wherever we want. You're not going to know, and then we're going to start gluing ourselves to stuff. And I saw this
Yeah.
happen in the Port of Oakland recently, where there's a military Sea Lift Command vessel, and those are the vessels that carry ammunition and trucks and tanks and stuff all around the world. And by the way, not anywhere near or giving any kind of aid to Israel. Port of Oakland, protesters got onto the port, got onto the
Mhm.
vessel, and were hanging off the Jacob's ladder, and that's the ladder that goes up the side of the ship. And the Coast Guard had to come and try and keep them off it, but they were doing their nonviolent protest. But that was incredibly disruptive and potentially a pretty significant security issue, because now I think the vessel was empty, but it could have had lots of military munitions on them. And they do these rushes too, where they'll rush the stage as somebody who's not even involved in the situation or in any kind of aid or support to Israel or Gaza, and they'll rush it, banners out. Security folks don't know what's going on. This happened to a friend of mine who works executive protection. Her CEO was on stage, and somebody rushed the stage to protest these things. And so we're seeing traffic being blocked on freeways and highways. The Bay Bridge in San Francisco is just blocked. People are gluing themselves to the street so that they have to, cause all these disruptions. And that's something that really is becoming a security issue. Yeah, sure, it's a law enforcement issue, but are they responding? Are they handling it? Their response is let them protest so that they don't riot. That's what I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah, no, but man, you got me add on that. Criminality, the age of criminality is becoming smaller and smaller, like younger and younger. So it's
Right.
really funny. I remember when I was a cop, in the little time that I was a cop, I remember like 15-year-olds, man, they had no fear. They had no fear. And the funny thing is that now, tragic thing is that they're getting this information through social media and everything else a lot at a younger age now. So, and they're extremely, impressionable by 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age. So what you're seeing a lot of are thefts, crimes. I mean, the kid just got shot. 12-year-old kid just got shot trying to rob a car here in the U.S. last week. And the guy who's an off-duty cop shot the kid, not knowing. He just thought he was getting robbed / his vehicle being taken away. But it was a 12-year-old kid that's been arrested 4 different times already for car theft, right? So they're getting younger, but I think it's because they're so easily impressionable and they can see all of this information that's coming through the screens for them. So that's another real threat, I think, as we're talking about to the future of crime and security and what's going
Yeah.
on, is that these young kids are super impressionable. They're seeing everything and they're starting to do things at a younger age. So negative things at a younger age. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a whole other thing, Rob.
Hmm. And the point I'll add too that we've seen on our side of things with the protests is just the huge risk right now with counter protests where you have two
Yeah.
groups like Republicans, Democrats, the Israeli Palestine thing. That's two contentious groups, and it's fine. A normal protest happens, everyone's doing their thing, but when you got two different sides facing off on the same square, maybe beaten up or whatever, that's when things can get really dangerous. I think about my fiance. She got an email from her work one day. There was an LGBT group with I don't know how it's controversial. I'm gonna call it what I'm gonna call the other side because anti-LGBT or concerned about what's being taught in school, whatever their position was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the issue is you got these two groups facing off. They might be it didn't turn everything. Everyone was peaceful. Everything was fine. But now you got employees walking through that. So even if you're a company,
Yeah.
you're like, I don't care about these issues. We're apolitical. We're just focused on making the money. But your employees got to walk to work or get to work somehow, and these things might be happening. So
Well, and Rob, I'll throw another one in on you. Here in the United States, we have armed protesters. I lived it during the last presidential election. I volunteer as an Arizona Ranger, and there was several instances where we were involved in supporting our law enforcement partners, and the protesters, half of the protesters, because we had counter protesters, half were very well armed and half were not well armed at all. And I'll let you guess which side of the aisle they wound up on. But we had to keep everybody cool and calm, and we had to go out into the crowd and we had to tell some of these folks who were carrying better firearms than I was, and more deadly firearms. Hey, you need to point the barrel at the ground. You're flagging everybody. Just like work with us here. And you had to keep everybody calm, and you had to deconflict, and you had to de-escalate these things. And again, our law enforcement partners are spread too thin. And how do we do this as corporate security professionals is going to be very telling, because at least in the United States, they're practicing their Second Amendment right, and that in many states is their right to keep and bear arms and to open carry. As I'm not going to get political on here, but it is a challenge for corporate security.
Everybody's getting emboldened.
Emboldened, yes.
Emboldened. Thank you very much.
Yes.
And that's the problem today. And the last thing I'm going to say when it comes to security, right here in Oakland, right next to our house, yesterday, the teachers of Oakland decided to do a sit-in on behalf of Palestine. Now, half of the community is a Jewish community over there in Oakland, especially in the hills of Oakland. There's a lot of Jewish people. But even they're so emboldened that government people are emboldened to do a sit-in, and the government, I don't care who you like. It doesn't matter to me. My kid needs to go to school. They need to be educated. I don't care what your beliefs are. And the commissioner of schools here, the superintendent of schools says, don't do it. Right? They did it anyways. And that none of them are going to get fired, not in California for sure, with tenure and everything else in the school education. But they're so emboldened. Even government people now are doing these prescribed sit-ins or whatever they believe, and nobody's doing anything about it. Everybody's so afraid, man, to say no. That's a no, and now you have to pay for it, like I do to my 4-year-old kid, right? That's a no. Go to your room, right? Bad behavior. Go to your room. Anyways.
And what happens when the employees do the same thing, Carlos? Exactly. Yeah, they want to have a sit-in in the cafeteria, and I'm sure this is, this goes back to the ESG agendas, right? And how do we balance both sides of a hotly contested issue, and we allow for this kind of dissent to occur, but safely in our work community, if you will. Security needs to be part of that discussion, right? HR always is, but security is always that afterthought. Like, we allowed the pro-Palestine group to meet in the cafeteria. Now they're chaining the door shut. What do? Call security. Wait, security didn't know about this.
God, great point. Great point for all the corporate security leaders that are out there, right? If you don't have policies that are strong enough and to set a precedence within your company that states that those things will not occur here, and if they do, that's a policy. And then you have to, by the way, stick by them, right? You can't just write a policy and be like, we'll let that. It's not that big of a deal. We'll let that.
Yep.
What happens exactly that? Well, you let one group do it. Guess what happened? You got to let the other group do it. So make sure that we are part of those policy writing, like you said, with our legal folks and our HR folks. Make sure that we're in there with them. Make sure those policies are making sense.
Yeah. That's outstanding point, guy. Because like I said, like some of these things is like it's on the other side of the world. It's not like it's still implications, big implications at all the companies where security leaders are working.